Yeah, I've never seen that before.
I like it.
Yeah, I've seen it elsewhere, but never on ours. So now we are live.
Mackenzie, while Kevin gets started, he's asked me to give the thought. I'll just need to have screen sharing privileges once we get to the thought, just as a heads up.
Okay, I'll be ready.
Thanks.
I'll be ready for you.
All right, well, let's get started with the chair determination letter. I kind of hope this is the last time we have to do this, but we'll see how things go. In accordance with Utah Code Section 52-4-207, subsection 4 of the Utah Open and Public Meeting Act, I have determined that conducting an electronic meeting of the Centerville Planning Commission with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based on the facts and circumstances surrounding COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. And I have asked Commissioner Summerhays to give a thought or prayer, so we will turn the time over to him. After you unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm trying to get a few things up here. So I'm going to try and channel my inner Lisa Romney here. It won't be probably as special as hers is, but I'll go ahead and screen share and tell me once that comes up. Hopefully that, everybody see that? Okay, so
looks good.
A definition of perspective is to see how we fit in the grand scheme of things. And I think for us as planning commission members, and as we think about land use planning, we try and have this broad perspective, but also we come to make specific decisions as we go through. Last Thursday, we had the chance to go to the Grand Canyon. It's the first time I've ever been to the Grand Canyon, which is a shame to say, I suppose. But this is a view looking from the south rim out to the north rim, probably about 7:45 last Thursday evening. And we'll come back to this, but this is just a good reminder on the general plan provides us the ability to look at our long range goals for that impact our present and our future. This is 7:15 a.m. on Thursday on the North Rim, 47 degrees at the North Kalbab Trail. About 3 months ago, my sister-in-law called my wife and said, "Hey, I want to hike rim to the rim. Are you in? Do you want to come?" And my wife enthusiastically said yes, which I was surprised by. But because she exercises regularly, but not for long distances. And obviously the rim to rim hike is a big bite to chew off, but she did a little bit of training and was ready. So this is our first view as we headed down into the Grand Canyon. And you can see way, way off in the distance, the south rim, although that's not where you go because you actually kind of head down the canyon here and then you head what I would say a little southwesterly. But again, pictures of us heading down into the canyon. It's a great time of year to go. May is fairly green. It's as green as probably you're going to get in the Grand Canyon. Just pictures along the way. You get deeper and deeper. It's one of the few places in the world, or at least in North America, you pass through 6 of the 7 climate zones of North America in this hike alone. This is us getting closer. You see a lot of water, or at least a little bit of water in the canyon. Continuing to head down. Now you're heading down to that southwesterly position. You get down even deeper in the canyon. This is what's called the box. You go from about 8,200 feet, I think, on the north rim, all the way down to Phantom Ranch or the Colorado Rivers, about 2,500 feet. Along the way, you've got signposts that help you see where you're headed. Talking about perspective, these are blossoms of a plant that you can only find in the Grand Canyon. It's an agave plant. It's specific to the Grand Canyon, but what you don't realize is how big they are once you you happen upon them. By my estimation, that's about 20 feet tall. So kind of neat to see that blooming at that time of year. You also have cactus blooming. So you have this big, huge canyon, but along the way you see these nice little things too that are just make it so neat. Colorado River crossing, 103 degrees. So we went from 47 degrees to 103 degrees just because of your loss of elevation and going down. And then you head back up. And the amazing thing is when you're at either of the rims and you look out over the Grand Canyon, you really don't see much of the second canyon. I would say now that I've done it, it's a canyon within a canyon. And you don't even see the Colorado River from either rim based off of how deep it is and how it kind of layers itself down. Funny signs along the way. You'll see these signs only on the south part of the trail. You never see these signs, these caution signs on the north rim. I'm not sure, probably because there's more people that visit the south rim, but caution, down is optional, up is mandatory. Another warning sign, hiking the Colorado River and back in one day is probably not advised, but we did it anyway. And we're just hiking out. That's my wife as we head out. That's kind of like what you see mostly from up on the upper rim is this kind of terrain and environment. Almost getting close back to the top. I took the zoom in here and I'll go back and forth. I zoomed in because when I talked about the box earlier, you're down in that the depths of that, what I would call the second canyon of the Grand Canyon. But again, you have this amazing perspective. That's the four of us that did it together, sister-in-law and a friend. And again, the parting shot is that to have this opportunity to serve on the planning commission, to have perspective of what we're trying to accomplish is a great thing. And frankly, to serve together with people with different perspectives that help us make good decisions together, I think is key. So I share that with you, and I'll go ahead and say a prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful to meet as a planning commission this night. We pray for thy help and guidance as we make decisions, as we discuss, and as we try and guide the city land use. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Great. Thank you for that. That was that's awesome. That sounds like a really cool trip. So
Okay, go
I'm sorry, can I ask you how long when you said it wasn't recommended, did you go from one end to the other and back in a single day or just one way?
We did rim to rim. Going back all together would be rim to rim to rim.
Okay.
So I know people that do it. We didn't do that. It took us all of, moving time was about 8.5 hours. Total time was about 12.5 hours. So 25.5 miles and about 5,000 feet of elevation climb down, and give or take, because the south rim is actually about 1,000 feet lower in elevation than the north rim.
That was very cool. Thank you for sharing.
that is cool. All right, let's move along now to the first item on our agenda, which has been scheduled for a public hearing. It is an administrative decision, and this has to do with the Hafoka residence site plan. So we will turn the time over to Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair Daly and members of the commission. So this first item, a public hearing for a conceptual site plan for Andy and Lisa Hafoka. And let me share my screen just a moment. Okay, so this is the staff report. I'll start with that staff recommends that we approve this application with several conditions. And then I'll go for the background. So this site in red was previously residential medium and residential low. It kind of cut through. And so in 2018, they made it all residential medium. They also demolished one of the houses on the lot. But because it is residential medium, it requires planning commission review instead of just a building permit review. The house would be in a residential low zone. So I highlighted several things in the staff report to note. There, as far as the base development requirements, they are in compliance, their proposals in compliance with all of these items, criterion. And then there's just a few things. The architectural plans provided need to be stamped by the architect. They were drafted by an architectural firm, but not stamped. So that's one thing we need. And then the other thing of note is on page 4. So they had a geotech company come out and review the depth of the water table, and it is fairly high in this location. And so they recommended that any livable space be 2 feet above the design, let's see, I want to say it the right way, design groundwater table. So that would be about 3.5 feet below current grade. So that would raise up the home more than currently proposed. And then talking with the city engineer and the drainage supervisor, since it's over an acre, and so for properties that are over an acre, state LID standards come into play only if more than 10% of the property is gone from pervious surface to impervious. And staff decided that if they do follow through and remove the old house and the garage and the driveway as planned, then they won't hit that 10% threshold. But staff did say we would like to have some kind of insurance that that would happen, but recommended that that happen at the final site plan stage rather than this conceptual site plan stage. I think those are the majority of the things I would like to highlight on this application. There are a few things missing. Since the owner is the developer, often there's a lot of things going on in a conceptual site plan. And so staff figured it would be worth it to help them get all the things done in a slightly more streamlined fashion, which is why we had these 8 conditions of recommended approval. So if you have any questions on this, I'd love to answer them.
Yeah, quick question for you, Mackenzie. How many, so this is a residential medium, which requires that it comes to us. If this were residential low, you said it would not. It would just be a building permit. But are any of these items that we're asking for in the conditions things that would not otherwise be asked for in a residential low building permit type of a situation?
The stamped architectural plans aren't a requirement just at building permit. The fences aren't usually required at a building permit stage. And let's see if there's anything else. Most of them would be included. Water, sewer, drainage, all of those would be building permit stuff.
Okay, that was the main thing I was looking for, just kind of getting a feel for really if this is any different than residential low or not. So anybody else have? Oh, go ahead.
Of a single family dwelling, it's not particularly different. If there was 2 or more, then more things come into place. More of that code applies, but when it's just one, most of the residential medium code gets crossed off. So.
Okay, thanks, Mackenzie. Does anybody else have any questions for staff? I see a lot of shaking heads, so that's a good sign, I guess. Let's turn the time over to the applicant. If you'd like to speak to any of the points in the staff report or any of our staff's presentation or anything else you'd like us to hear about, now is your time.
Yeah, of
If
course.
you'd introduce yourselves.
Right. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Lisa Hafoka, and this is my husband, Andy Hafoka. And yes, we're the ones that are asking to have our home be built here.
Sounds good. Is there any comments or concerns about the conditions or the staff report?
Do you have any questions?
No.
I don't think so. We, talked with Corey and Mackenzie and Kevin, everybody at the city. And, they helped us get everything that, that was required and things that we didn't know about. But, they've helped us out to the point where we understand everything that needs to happen. And we don't really have any questions at this point. Did you have
any question? But just want to thank everybody in the staff for helping us, and they so kind to us. Everything they do, we really appreciate that, and thank you for your kindness. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, perfect then. So we will we'll go ahead and ask you to go on mute, and then we will open up this for a public hearing. This has been scheduled for a public hearing. So we'll give an opportunity for any members of the public who would like to speak. We don't have anybody else on the meeting with us, but we can give everybody just a little bit of time to dial in if there are any comments to be made. Not seeing any activity there. So we will go ahead, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, there were no comments on that. So let's go back to the Planning Commission. Any further questions or comments from anybody? All right, anybody want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to accept the conceptual site plan for the Hafoka residence at approximately 522 West, 400 South, parcel 03-001-0209, with conditions 1 through 8 as listed in the staff report, and 4 suggested reasons A in the staff report.
I'll second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. All right. Well, I have a feeling nobody has much to say because you're just a chatty bunch tonight. So we will go ahead and vote on the motion that we have before us. We'll go in the order that's on my screen. We're going to start with Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Shagrud.
Aye.
Commissioner Summerhays.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Hayman.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. That was relatively painless. So let's move ahead now to the next item on our agenda. We are going to talk about bylaws and kind of the proposed bylaws that Mackenzie has put together for us. So Mackenzie, if you're ready, we'll turn the time back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So these are a new draft of the bylaws with the input you provided several months ago. I also rearranged them in an order that made sense to me. Whether it makes sense to you is up to you guys. But I tried to make it flow in the order of proceedings in a meeting. So I will share that with you. I did find a typo, so I know that there's some typos in here. But if you have any changes you'd like to make or sections added, please let me know. And then next step would be to recommend a draft for consideration and approval at the city council level.
Okay. The one thing that I wanted to maybe talk about, two things, I think. Where'd they go? Under motions, just talk about the difference between changing a motion and amending a motion. Are we kind of treating changing a motion like the friendly amendments, or explain what the thought there is between changing a motion and amending a motion?
As far as I understand it, there isn't a significant difference. These are just pulled from the previous, so I assume they're in Robert's Rules of Order. Lisa could talk to that more if she's clear on these, but they are basically the same.
Okay. All right. And then my other question is, just to be clear, under conflicts of interest, number 2, recusal, just about halfway through that paragraph, it says commissioners should state on the record their recusal and the reasons therefore at the introduction of the agenda item or discussed matter. We're not expecting somebody to lay it all out up front, just kind of say, due to personal reasons, I need to recuse myself, keep it pretty general, right?
Yeah, a general reason is acceptable. I don't think you have to provide any private information in a public setting. So.
Yeah, and just on that recusal, I think the statute does require that you at least state the reason why. So if you're saying, you know, it's my neighbor, or this is my relative, or I own property next door. So that type of information.
Okay.
And then I'm just reviewing this changing of a motion versus amending a motion. It appears to me that changing of a motion is when the maker would like to change his or her own motion. So they want to change the motion and then they double check with the second. I don't love that. I guess, I mean, I'm familiar with amending a motion under Robert's Rules. So I'd have to see if this changing of a motion, but technically it appears to me that it's the maker of the motion can change his or her as long as the second, let's see, may change the motion. Yeah, before the vote.
It doesn't say it has to be the same, right? It just says somebody else has to second the changed motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I like. I mean, the thing that I don't really prefer, yeah, if you want to amend a motion, just amend it. This asking the maker of the motion to change their motion, that's really an amendment. You're pressuring the maker to change their motion to what you want. And I always just prefer an amendment. If you do it swiftly, it's pretty easy. So those are my comments. More substance than you wanted.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm open for a discussion among the commission about this. I tend to lean more toward Lisa's side, but at the same time, I see the value in having the ability to quickly and nimbly adjust a motion that was just put on the table or something like that. So I don't know if anybody else has any strong feelings about changing a motion versus just amending a motion.
Well, and I will say, if it was something you talked about, like amending condition number 2, and it appears that the maker just forgot to add that and you'd all talked about it, I do agree. I'm all about having, you know, efficient meetings. And that's why we say we adopt Robert's Rules of Orders, but, you know, we don't have to strictly follow them. But if you're actually adding something of substance that's your own idea or issue, then my suggestion is that you just make it an amendment. So
I'm going to disagree with Lisa. I agree with her a lot. I like the idea of having a changed motion if it's the maker who is making it. While I respect Robert's Rules of Order, I think that we can do whatever makes sense for us, and we can adopt whatever procedures what makes sense for us. And I think that just as a matter of practice, we tend to do that a lot. So I'd like to give us that flexibility to do it. It won't preclude us from going the formal amendment of a motion route, but I like having the flexibility to streamline things for what it's.
Are you talking about where someone says, well, I'm asking the maker to amend their motion or to change their motion? Is that what you're saying?
I like friendly amendments.
Well, I think that the way that it's written, though, it'd still work to be able to do what we've kind of always done with the so-called friendly amendments. In a way, the maker of the motion, they're almost withdrawing their motion and putting it back in again, and they have to get a second all over again to continue. So, and there should be some clarity about how that all happens. So. Anyway, if nobody else has any really strong feelings about that, I think that we can just leave it and go with that. So does anybody else have anything they want to talk about with these bylaws, or should we have staff actually draft up something formal that we can then present to the city council?
The only other small nit that I would make, I'm sorry, Becky, is under the meeting agenda. It says that the community development director shall review the proposed agenda with the planning commission chair. I know that Corey would review it with me when I was chair, like when there was a difficult one or a decision had to be made, but a lot of the times he didn't because it was pretty straightforward. So I would change that from shall to should. And I'm fine giving our community development director the discretion to decide when to reach out to the planning chair.
Okay. Yep. Becky?
And then I was just gonna see the consideration of agenda items. I just wanted to review that because that's not always how we do it. So I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable with how we're doing it. Chair introduces the agenda items, staff makes presentation and recommendations, then the applicant makes a presentation or responds. Public hearing if required in accordance with ordinance and state law, then staff and applicant respond. And then applicant provides opportunity to make concluding remarks and commissioners discuss and debate. Usually after like G, I'm just trying to figure out, we don't always follow that because staff a lot of times will jump in. So if we want staff to jump in at that point, then we should put it there. And if we want to have that be more discussion time, then it's how it's written. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not sure if we followed exactly that.
Yeah, I'd say that we're pretty good about following that. The one difference might be under B, staff makes a presentation, and then following that is the more interactive portion between the commission and staff. So that's almost like, bump everything else down. And that's C would be commission has the opportunity to ask questions of staff. And then really for what is G on there, commissioners discuss it, that's our opportunity to discuss amongst ourselves. And I know that the staff tends to try hard not to insert themselves unless we're heading off the rails or something like that. But do you want to add something in there, Becky, or?
Oh, I just want to make sure that if we're adopting these bylaws, that they're what we actually do. And if we feel comfortable with that, then we can move forward. But if there's something where you feel like maybe we add in that, like you said, that section or look through and see like the order of how things go, then we should probably just leave it as is.
Becky, if I'm understanding you, what you want is you just don't want to be precluded from involving staff at our request as part of that subset G. So maybe it says commissioners discuss and debate the agenda item and request staff involvement as necessary. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, I do think like we ask staff and we have some discussion with staff that's not necessarily written in that order. And sometimes that, like Kevin says, sometimes that comes right at the beginning. It usually comes right at the beginning. And then sometimes without us asking staff, sometimes staff will jump in when we're discussing. So should we put that as an option for them to jump in? Should we keep it as is? Is there a reason for one or the other? That kind of thing. Like, why was it originally written this way? Is there reasoning, and just how we can kind of follow what we're actually bylaws are?
Would anybody be opposed if we change G to commissioners discuss and debate the agenda item?
I wonder if, like Kevin said, I think it's better if we put it up where it usually happens. Maybe.
Well, I think we could probably do both, just so that, you know, we don't paint ourselves into a corner and we're not, you know, violating our own bylaws by having staff interject. So I would say either add something to B, or actually it probably feels better to me to just bump everything down and put a new C in that talks about, you know, the commission asks questions of staff.
Maybe even just on B, say staff makes presentations and recommendations and responds to questions from the commission.
Okay, that sounds good to me. And then add
not too many.
Spencer's little friendly amendment to G.
Corey, tell me what you think about that, because I know that you've said in previous times, like, oh, I want you guys to just debate. I want you to discuss it. Like, why would it be written this way, or why should we change it?
Well, get the position on video here. I can see it both ways. I mean, one of the things that is maybe not so good about staff jumping in during your discussion is the perception that we're lobbying and the applicant and others don't have a chance to lobby. That can come across that way. And, you know, often, hopefully, most of the time, we're not actually lobbying you. We're, as you said, we're maybe concerned that the railroad track has a break in it, and we're trying to, you know, head off something that we think is important. But I think you should have options to query the staff and query the applicant in your discussion. I know that can be a little bit uncomfortable at times because the public might be sitting there saying, why do they get to answer more? But remember, the applicant, it's their petition. And if there's something to explore with them, you should be able to explore that in your discussion. But overall, staff and the applicant should be letting the Planning Commission come to terms with whether they're ready to head forward with a decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and my other question is, sometimes it feels like kind of how you said that, sometimes it feels like we start discussing and then the applicant's like, wait, and they kind of want to jump back in or something.
Right.
So would it make sense to have two discussion areas, like one closer towards the beginning after we've heard from some people, and then there's some response from like staff and the applicant, and then it's like closed off at that point? Or would it be, you know, it's two discussion periods? I don't know.
Well, I think, you know, from my memory of it, we generally follow this in a generalized sense. Is this, you know, staff makes a presentation, the applicant makes their presentation, go to the public hearing, come back, staff answers some questions, the applicant has the last word, then you go to commission discussion.
I like Corey's point about, you know, the staff not being seen as lobbying. And that's why I suggest if we add any language, it is that we just commissioners discuss and debate the agenda item, and at the commission's request, follow up with staff, something to that effect.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking too, is that we could have in there something along the lines of, you know, the commission may ask clarifying questions of staff and or the applicant.
Yes, I like that.
That gives us freedom for even if after, if while we're discussing, if there's a point of clarification that we need.
I'm not getting too hung. I think it's great to clarify it, but I'm trying not to get too hung up on it, given that we do have the statement that the procedure can be modified at any time by the chair if necessary. So we always have the overriding freedom to do whatever we need to do.
Yeah, well, and along those lines too, the other thing I was thinking is in that paragraph that Shaylin was just in there, where it says let's see here.
Normally be observed.
Will normally be observed. We can change normally to generally, and that gives us even more wiggle room, right? I don't know. Maybe normally and generally are the same.
Ask the lawyer.
We got a couple of lawyers on the commission, plus Lisa.
I like generally. How about you, Mason? Shaylin?
I would call it sixes or a half a dozen, whichever way you want to skin the cat.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mackenzie, we've talked about some little changes there. Is it clear as mud for you?
Yeah, let me verify what I just heard. So on B, this is what I wrote down. You can tell me if I am up in the night. So B, add a line at the end. So make it staff makes presentation and recommendations and response to questions from the Planning Commission. I also added that to C as well. Applicant makes presentation and can respond to questions as needed. And then for G, commissioners discuss and debate the agenda item. And at the commission's request, staff may provide input.
Yes, staff and or the applicant. I think we want to be able to ask clarifying questions of the applicant as well.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else they would like to talk about with these bylaws? No, then we'll put this back to you, Mackenzie, and we'll look forward to seeing this again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mackenzie. All right, moving along. Let's turn the time over to Lisa for our land use training. We got, looks like 20 pages of code to go through, Lisa.
Well, I put in the detail, hopefully of Nova's, just that we're just going to talk about the first 4 pages. I was going to do 8, but it said 4, and that was an easy page break. So for those of you that read all 20, huge gold star. And if you all read all 20, then maybe we'll just start with part 6 next time. But anyway, it should be pretty quick. Let me see if I can share my screen. And I just want to say, Commissioner Summerhays, that was great. I have not done rim to rim. It's on the list, but the elevation and the mileage is just crazy. I've only ever hiked, I think, maybe 14 or 15 miles. So
I thought for sure you would have done this. Like I was just patronizing you. So I'm glad to hear that at least.
No, I have never done that. And seriously, I really want to do it, but I might actually just camp at Phantom Ranch and then hike out the next day. So
a lot of people do that.
That was great. I really enjoyed it. So anyway, today we're going to talk about pages 1 through 4 of part 5, because it is a very lengthy one. So in our annual calendar, I kind of divided this into actually 3 months. So we have 3 times to address all of these issues, because there's quite a bit in this section. So and then our travel destination, in addition to the Grand Canyon, is Annapurna in Nepal. And so this is just a picture from the airplane of kind of the Pokhara Valley where you fly into. And this is Machu Picchu, which is a peak. And then over here is the Annapurna South. So basically all of these trips take extensive bus rides. I think this one was another 3-hour bus ride to get just to the trailhead. So anyway, it seems like this trip was a long time ago. Okay, so last time we talked about the general plan, which is basically the building blocks of planning for the city. And this week we're going to talk about the zoning code. So the zoning code essentially implements what we've put in our general plan. The general plan is long range planning, and then the zoning code implements those plans, but also provides details about how people can build within the city or develop their property. And so there were a lot of changes in 2019 and a few in 2021 to this section of the code. But essentially, the legislative body is the one that can enact a land use regulation, which is essentially adopting an ordinance in our zoning code or amending or adopting our zoning map. But in 2019, they did add this language that only a legislative body, they added this, as the body authorized to weigh policy considerations, may enact a land use regulation. And I think that this was an important addition, to the authors or those that were lobbying for this to really acknowledge that, we're trying to make that distinction between legislative decisions and administrative decisions. And the legislative body, the city council, is the one that makes those policy decisions. And so they wanted to add that in, that the legislative body is the one in the city to make policy considerations. And then the rest of the bodies within the system just interpret and enforce those policy considerations that the council makes. Another change from 2019 is this section that says a legislative body shall adopt a land use regulation, dividing the city into districts and designating, general uses. And we'll get to another section where it just says you may, but so I thought it was kind of interesting here where they're saying, we actually, the legislative body has to adopt a zoning code and a zoning map. So some people felt that was important. We are not one of those towns in Texas that does not have zoning. I think every city in Utah does have a zoning code and a zoning map, but they wanted to make that clear that it's mandatory. So then I think this is also important that the legislature said, look, we want the Planning Commission to weigh in on every single zoning code consideration and every single zoning map and make a recommendation to the city council. And by statute, the Planning Commission is the body that is designated by statute to hold the public hearing on land use regulations. So zoning code and zoning map amendments. So again, I thought this was interesting because the legislative body just has to hold a public meeting. And so sometimes in our chart, we talk about what in our noticing, because we do more noticing than is required by state law. So this is just a reminder that Centerville does allow and require more public hearings in these types of decisions, because we do have a public hearing at both the Planning Commission and the City Council. But by statute, it's the Planning Commission that takes in the public hearing. So I think that's really interesting, considering that you're not the one that ultimately makes the policy decision. It is the legislative body. And then it says here, the legislative body shall merely provide notice and hold a public meeting. I believe this is also a 2019 amendment. I think we did add this to our zoning code, but I'll have to double check. But it does say that, if the Planning Commission is just stalling on a decision, the City Council can actually say, you know what, this has taken long enough. This is like 6 months that you've had this South Main Street plan, and we are going to consider your failure to make a timely recommendation as just a recommendation of denial. So I don't think that we've had that problem in Centerville. This Planning Commission does some amazing work and tries to move things along swiftly, but obviously that must have been a problem in some other cities. But basically the Planning Commission, we get these laws by one bad actor. So somewhere a Planning Commission sat on something, perhaps intentionally, I don't know. And then we get this law.
It was probably Summit County, Lisa.
Oh, Summit County? Okay. Well, what kind of project was it?
A lot of complaints were coming in because it would take 2 years for the planning commission to get something on an agenda.
Mhm.
Because we were only doing about 3 applications a night of the 10, and we would go till 4 or 5 in the morning on those 3 applications.
No.
So the sewer district up there, it was 2 years before they ended up on an agenda.
Wow. Okay. Good. Thanks for that background. And then the other part of this chapter, so we have the enactment that you have to enact a zoning code and a zoning map. And then this section just talks about amending that. And honestly, most of this section is the whole Salt Lake City case of creating a historic district. So I actually think this subsection 4 should be a new section, like a 503.5. Anyway, it just needs to be its own. But basically this says that the city council is the one that amends it, but they're going to follow the exact same procedure for amending it. So anyway, like Commissioner Summerhays's trip, ours was kind of the opposite. We started out in really, really hot weather and ended up, with every single piece of clothing and down jacket on that we owned. But this was day 1, and we are in basically the tropics of Nepal. And what I really like about this Annapurna, it's called the Annapurna Base Camp or Annapurna Sanctuary trek, and it's about a 45-mile trek over, I don't know, like 9 days. You can also do a circuit, but the circuit takes about 22 to 24 days. And obviously I still have a job, or I still want a job. So I did not do the full circuit. I just did the really quick, go straight in and come straight back out. So anyway, this is just heading up. And what I like about this is actually you're going on these trails and paths between villages. These are just villages, and these trails are the trails that they all use to get from place to place. So it was kind of nice. And so you can see here, this is a little bit bigger. This is, probably in Nepal, this is a road. And you can see, if you can see my pointer, this is where we're going. This is the Annapurna South. Obviously we're not going to the top, but we have to make our way all the way over to the base there. So we like to call it the Nepali flat, which means nothing is flat. You either go straight up or straight down. This is a little deceiving, but yeah, or the Nepali mile, which, every mile seems like, uh-oh, that was 10 minutes. That was fast. Every mile seems like 5. So anyway, okay. Temporary land use regulations. We haven't used these in a long time, but the law does allow the city council to enact an ordinance where they basically put a moratorium on certain kinds of subdivisions or building. We don't use these as much anymore because there was a opinion letter out of the private property rights ombudsman's office that said, you know what, in order to prove a finding of compelling countervailing public interest, you really need to show that it's necessary. They do not believe that a compelling countervailing public interest is, for instance, that you just want to change from the direction that the previous council went, or your current code. And this is kind of what I always say is, the first person through the gate that acknowledges an error or some sort of loophole in our code, my professional opinion is they get through. But then after that, we can impose some type of moratorium or something that we want to fix it, or we really want to look at it comprehensively. I think the last moratorium that we issued or thought about issuing was for the South Main Street plan, because we were worried about how some of the area was going to develop. I'm not sure in that instance the council adopted it, but we haven't done one for quite some time. So, and those have to be. Yeah.
Was the ADU, that was just a change in the code? I thought it was a moratorium on that.
I don't remember one on the ADUs. Okay. I think there's been 2, and I couldn't remember the other one. Maybe it was the ADUs, but yeah, these can be imposed without any kind of notice and without any public hearing. And so the law says that you can only impose them for a period of 6 months. So they're pretty limited. But but they do make sense. And I'm glad that cities have this authority, because sometimes we realize that there is something that we really need to fix, or that, you know, one development could completely change our opportunity to, you know, make a lasting long-term, you know, planning direction change. So we can do those. Okay, just to kind of show you the accommodations on these kinds of trips. This was when I realized once again my dislike of leeches. Luckily we were not in the rainy season, but there were still leeches. And I think we got one of these tents over here and it was kind of in a sinkhole. Anyway, had leeches in our tent and on our, it was awful. I hate leeches. This is my sister. And I don't know if you guys know, I did lose one of my sisters last year. And Patty was in the hospital last week with a couple heart attacks. And so I just want to tell you to really appreciate, you know, your family and life, because I mean, I'm glad we have all these trips, and I'm not sure she's going to be able to go on them again, but you know, she was in the Kilimanjaro one too. So hopefully she'll stick around. But evidently her heart was fine. It was a coronary artery spasm where your artery actually clamps up, maybe because she was under too much stress. So that's another thing. Don't take things too seriously. So probably more than you wanted to know, but I really want people to appreciate life and come out of this pandemic, you know, healthier and happier. So this is the section that used to say, see, the legislative body may divide the territory into zoning districts, but we now know that we have to, based upon the amendments earlier. And this allows us to enact, you know, floodplain ordinances, geologic hazard ordinances, which Centerville has both. And some of those with our hillside. And it does say here that we have to ensure that the regulations for each zone are uniform, but you can have different regulations in different zones. And so that's how we say, look, we're being fair. It depends what zone you're in. And that's where, you know, Corey and I are always saying, if you want a different tool, just, you know, you could create another zone, or you could create a subzone. And in that subzone, you can have different rules. So just remember that as an extra tool if we feel like we don't have enough tools, or we want a specific area to be a little different. And I do think that the Main Street corridor is kind of like this. You know, we have our commercial medium, and then we have the overlay zone. And I'm not sure when this came about, but it does say here that there is no minimum area of ownership required for a zone designation, and that the size of the zoning district or the number of owners in it, like maybe just one, cannot be used as evidence of illegality of that zoning district or make it invalid. And so this is kind of where we used to say, look, is that, you know, spot zoning when you just zone that one parcel on the corner for commercial medium so that you can have a gas station? That seems, you know, like you're just trying to provide special privileges for that one property owner. But in Utah, they're kind of saying, no, we think if there's reasons why you want even one property or a half an acre to be one zone, it's not evidence of illegality. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, I mean, you still have to show reasons for it. So, and then the single family limit, as you know, there was an amendment to this in 2021. And I don't know if Mason wants to weigh in, because I'm not sure the impact of it, but it used to say the single family limit means the number of unrelated individuals allowed to occupy each residential unit. And now it just says the single family limit means the number of individuals, related or unrelated. And so for a city like Centerville, we cannot adopt a single family limit for a residential unit less than 4. So it seems to me that we might have had, our limit might have been higher because we said unrelated. So you could have, like, I don't know if you could have 5 in a family and then 1 unrelated. Anyway, I see Mason jumped on. Did have you heard what we think the impact of this is, or what they were trying to accomplish?
My understanding, and I could be completely wrong here, but there was a Supreme Court decision that said it was unconstitutional to limit it to blood ties, and that since family can be defined much more widely, that basically it doesn't, the relation was discriminatory under that particular aspect. So, and I think this was brought about a lot by lobbying for mental health homes in residential areas. And so they piggybacked off of their own constitutional protections for disability.
Okay, great. Well, that's good. So I talked a little bit with Corey about, amending our code, but there are some complications. So we'll be looking at that one. And I don't have any specific recommendations yet. Just kind of want to get a better sense of, the direction of that. So, but I appreciate Commissioner Kier's input on that.
Lisa, if I can quickly chime in.
Mhm.
This was discussed by the Utah League of Cities and Towns at our legislative update in Bountiful. There's also the issue of ADUs and what you're allowed to do and single family limits. This is where we're getting, where the left hand and the right hand don't necessarily reside. So there's concerns that in an ADU situation, what do you have is a number of individuals living in each unit. So there is some complications, and we'll just wade our way through it.
Yeah, and I think this was in the ADU ordinance, so that's where I was thinking it must have been related to that. But so, okay. And as you can see, we're getting much closer. Remember, I showed you in the beginning how far away we were, and this is where, I'm hoping at the end of this year, we're going to have read the entire Land Use Management Act. So we're getting there. We're halfway. We're probably not that close. And then this is the whole valley. And I did want to say this is about 13,000 feet, but Annapurna South is the 10th highest mountain in the world at 26,000 feet. So even if you're at 13,000, you're still looking at a 10,000 foot peak above you. So it was really spectacular. This was actually, there's only 14 peaks above 8,000 meters. And so again, this is one of those 14, and it was just beautiful.
That's awesome, Lisa. That's cool. So it's crazy that, that's twice as high as you're standing there, right? 13 up to 26.
Yes. And so I don't know if it was 2015 or about before we went there. Like I said, this was the first 8,000 plus meter peak to be hiked, and it was in 1950 by some Frenchmen. And but it's also one of the most dangerous. So I think in 2014 or so, 191 people had tried to hike to the top of this Annapurna South, and 61 of those died. So it has a 32% fatality rate. So it's one of the most dangerous peaks to hike because of the steepness and the avalanches that they get here. So 1 out of 3 die trying to climb this mountain.
That's crazy.
Yeah, pick your goals. Pick your goals wisely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Lisa. So just kind of a quick segue, Lisa, before we move into the Community Development Director's report, or part of the Community Development Director's report is ADU ordinance review. You're doing that ADU ordinance stuff, aren't you, Lisa?
Corey has already prepared some proposed amendments, and I have those under review. So we're looking to get those to you. I know Corey wants to get them to you shortly.
Looks like second meeting of June.
Yes.
Maybe. Okay. Well then, maybe we'll talk to Corey about that. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for filling us in. We look forward to next month. All right, Corey, Community Development Director's report and City Council report. Go for it.
Thank you, Chair Daly. Just a couple of things. There's some logistic changes on your agenda for next week, next meeting, next week in my mind. So commission meets every week from my perspective. The JF Capital application is not complete, so that will be bumped. What we've done is replaced, if you remember, we gave you a report that the city council had some park strip changes. And those park strip changes are now official. So we need to tidy up our zoning code that uses some of the references and some of the mimic standards. So Lisa's been working on that. So we have noticed, I think McKinsey has provided notice. Is that correct, McKinsey, for the next commission meeting?
That's correct.
Okay, so we've got that. I'm just beginning to work with the city engineer on the parking, so I'm not ready to bring that back on your agenda. I originally thought the JF Capital was coming, and so I kind of pulled and thought that would be your next agenda, or I'd bump to the next agenda at the end of June. It would be nice to bring that to the first meeting in June, but I have a hesitancy because when people look at your agenda and we change up these tentative applications, it may throw someone off. So right now, all we have defined for your agenda for the next meeting is the park strip. So it is either a really short meeting or you can add something if you want to discuss something. However, in the suggestion of discussing, I met with the city manager again on Tuesday, and they're looking at the first meeting in June with the council for a work session of goals. So one of the things that we can add to your agenda is bring up the past list of goals so that you can kind of familiarize yourself with those, maybe discuss any items that you're thinking of so that we're prepared for the meeting in July. So that's a suggestion I have for you.
That sounds good. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. Let's do that.
So a semi-short meeting. And that should cover, yes, I showed you that the Park Place or the Paris Creek Place rezone was adopted. So
Corey, did the Board of Adjustment meet recently?
they did not meet. There was some long discussion among various parties on wanting to participate in that. So we have postponed the meeting of the Board of Adjustment, and Lisa and I are working on the logistics with various entities to reschedule that meeting. I think it's going to be sometime mid-June. Am I off, Lisa?
Yes, we're trying to reschedule that. Also, the city will be represented by outside counsel so that I don't have a conflict in representing the planning commission below. There'll be a separate attorney. So we're still working on that. But yeah, it was scheduled for yesterday, last night, but it's been tabled.
Okay. All right. Very interesting stuff. Thanks. Anything else, Corey?
No, just the plot thickens. It always does.
It sure does. Okay. Thank you, Corey and Lisa and Mackenzie. Let's move along then to the last item on our agenda. We've got some minutes to review. It was a big 2-page meeting last time. So we'll just go with it. Does anybody have any recommended changes on either of the pages? No? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the minutes as unamended with a note to Kevin for streamlining that process.
Thanks. I'll second that motion. All right, we'll do this all together in the usual format. All those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. And I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Perfect. We are adjourned.